SPED 2010 students, I hope everyone had a great spring break and you're ready to get started with the term and kind of finish strong. So we're already at the halfway point. So I wanted to begin with our course calendar so you can kind of see where we were and where we are and where we're going. Okay, so we finished the first 5 modules. You are now beginning to take your midterm exam, and that is open. So the midterm exam opened on March the 17th. So just make sure that I did send an email out about that. If you haven't looked at that, you should go back and look at it. There's a study guide there for you, so make sure you complete the midterm exam. Also, you'll look, we had our spring break March 10th through the 14th, so that's finished, which means we're moving on into the second part of the course, which is Module 6. And Module 6 is important because it's talking all about assessment. Okay, so in Module 6, we will be reading Chapter 9 out of our textbook, Teaching in Today's Inclusive Classrooms. You will have, of course, like I mentioned, your midterm exam is due on the 23rd, but also you will be completing an assessment discussion along with your Module 6 quiz. And one other thing that I wanted to make you aware of is that one of your course projects is due. So either the interview or your peer-reviewed journal article is due. So please make sure that you get that submitted to the Dropbox. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with Module 6. So Module 6 is again talking about assessment. Now, a lot of times assessment can be overwhelming because we don't know where to go next with students. It does take time, but it's important. You need to assess where your students are. That way you can support their learning. Now, our book encompasses Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, excuse me. It's a framework, right, for teaching, learning, assessment, and curriculum development. So with that being said, we got to look at how do we maximize instructional support, but we can't do that if we don't have that assessment piece. So if you think back in Chapter 2, it really talked about the 3 essential qualities of Universal Design for Learning, which was representation, action, expression, and engagement, okay? So throughout this Module 6 of assessment, okay, you're going to see that these qualities are going to be implied in the area of assessment. Okay, so once again, when we design our assessments, we need to think about our learners and have them in our mind. Okay, so our learning objectives are for you to be able to describe the types and uses of large-scale assessments, alternative assessments, and ongoing assessments. You should be able to identify and describe effective classroom assessment approaches, explain methods for planning and organizing assessments, and discuss approaches to recording assessments. Now, all of these module objectives are going to help us meet our course objectives. Okay, so our course objectives are demonstrate knowledge of the contributions of parents and caregivers in the education of students with exceptionalities, describe the different categories and disabilities identified by IDEA and the Tennessee State Department of Education. Okay, understand the effects of linguistic and cultural diversity on the academic, emotional, social development of pupils with exceptionalities. And lastly, describe current legislation dealing with special education, including service delivery options and the concept of least restrictive alternatives, the assessment and the development of individualized education programs, and due process for parents and teachers, as well as basic terms and concepts related to special education. So here's some of our goals. These are not all of them. There are 4 of the 6, but this chapter is important, so it helps us to meet these course outcomes. So as always, I have given you important keywords and concepts. These are ones you should be concentrating on. Remember, it's important for you to understand concepts and define these keywords if you're going to be able to connect with the content. And I also told you which standards we'll be working on. So both the in-task, which is the teacher preparation standards, we're going to look specifically at 1 and 6, so learner development and assessment. And And then under Council for Exceptional Children, we will be looking at assessment and collaboration. Okay, so for Module 6, you have some reading resources. So you have your PowerPoint slides, you have the outline for Chapter 9, and then your reading of your chapter textbook. So you, even though we're working in Module 6, you're going to be reading Chapter 9. And I wanted to go ahead and take a few minutes and discuss some things that I want you to pay attention to and focus on in Chapter 9. So one of the major objectives is for you to know the difference between large-scale assessment, alternative assessments, right, ongoing assessments. This starts out talking about large-scale assessments, alternative assessments. So on page 228, all the way until 233, it talks about the differences in those assessments. Table 9.1 is kind of neat because it dives a little deeper into alternative assessments, and it gives you some examples of different kinds. Now, the next thing I want you to focus on is multiple intelligence inventories. Now, the reason I want you to focus on this is because this is actually going to be something that you're going to be doing for your homework assignment this week, for your discussion board. So it's important for you to read this section on multiple intelligences. Okay, so that starts on page 234 and it goes through till 236. So make sure you check that out. Now, one of the other things that helps us meet our course objectives is talking about working collaboratively and what that means when we talk about assessments. That is on page 236, where it actually gives you an example of how you could use an assessment profile based on multiple intelligences. So I thought that was kind of neat. Now, one of the things that you should know the difference between as a teacher and educator is what is a summative assessment and what's a formative assessment, and you should know the difference between the two and some examples. So formative assessments are things that are linked to activities, right? So like teacher-made tests, questions, quizzes, observation, projects, journals, any kind of class activities, right? So basically almost as what we call informal. When we're talking about summative, these examples are what we call high-stake testing, like portfolios, end of the year testing, cumulative student projects, unit exams, unit tests. So those are all kinds of summative assessments. And in a classroom, we need both of them. Okay, so it's important for you to know. Also, informative assessments, table 9.2 on page 239 really talks and breaks down what an informative assessment is and what it is not. So make sure you look at that. Now, something when we talk about RTI that you will learn, especially if your school implements RTI, response to intervention, is called CBMs, curriculum-based measurement. It's a type of assessment used for students in RTI. In the different tiers. So this is a section I feel like that will benefit you, so pay attention to that as well. It starts on page 240 and goes through to 242. Now, assistive technology is important, and we talk about in the terms of assessment specifically, we look at high-tech and low-tech materials. So what are some high-tech and low-tech options for students? That's something to look at. Especially if you look at table 9.3, it really goes over approaches to testing when we look at the different principles of UDL. Like, what are your approaches when we're trying to use multiple means of representation? What are some approaches when we're talking about multiple means of action and expression? What are some assessment accommodations we can make when we talk about engagement? So those are really good for you to look at as well. So with that being said, let's go back and look at our homework assignment when we talk about multiple intelligences. in terms of assessment. So down here under activities and assessment, you will see you have your quiz, module 6 quiz. It starts on March 10th and ends on March 23rd. Okay, I opened it early, I opened early just in case someone wanted to work on it over spring break. But if not, you are not late, don't worry, so you can go ahead and do that this week. Now, we talked about multiple intelligence a little bit in the book. Now, multiple intelligence is this theory that was developed by Howard Gardner. And he says that there are 8 distinct areas of intelligence in which individuals will demonstrate. When we talk about 8 different areas, we're really talking about varying levels of proficiency, right? So to understand this, it's divided up into areas such as linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial intelligence, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic, right? And what you're going to do is you are going to actually, as a teacher, look at where your students would fall in terms of multiple intelligence. But until you can do that with your students, right, and use assessments based off multiple intelligence, so you can help them engage with the material, it's important for you to understand what they actually are. So I thought it'd be neat for you to take the inventory yourself to see where you are, to have a better understanding of your strengths, right? That way, if you understand, you could start using inventories like this to help your students and maybe implement some teaching strategies or adjust it based on their strengths, and it would help you. So you're going to, on page 234 in your textbook, you're going to take this. And what I mean by taking this inventory, it's really simple. Under each intelligence, you will check the ones that apply to you. Now, there may be an area where none of that applies to you, and that's okay. Don't feel like you have to check a box. There may be areas where you check a lot of them, right? So you fall heavily in that intelligence, okay? So what you're going to do after you complete the checklist, you're going to share your results. And what I mean by that is you need to see where you fall. So where are you in terms of that? So page 236 talks about your results, right? You're going to identify your intelligence area. So let's say that you fall heavily in spatial and bodily kinesthetic. You would share that on the discussion board. Now, in addition to sharing your results of where you fell, you would also reflect on these questions. So you would be answering these questions in the prompt as well. Okay, so reflect on the tests and assessments you completed during your education. Think about back when you were in school. Did those assessments reflect your strengths in any of these areas? Okay, were any of your intelligences overlooked or not addressed in these assessments? So when you're going through and looking at these intelligence of where you are, did you ever have teachers that looked at your strengths in those areas, right? How might your performances in school look different if those assessments they gave you were aligned with your intelligences, and explain the potential impact? And then lastly, you're going to provide at least one personal example of an effective assessment you've encountered and one you found effective. Now, this could be in another service learning class. It could be in another education course. Maybe you work as a teaching assistant, wherever you found, but I would like one personal example of that. Now, you will be posting your results and the answers to these questions in the discussion board. Okay, so be sure you engage with your classmates by providing constructive feedback on their post, right? You need to respond to at least 2. Remember, when you're responding or replying, you don't put I agree or I was multiple intelligence or musical too. You are supposed to be offering insights or questions to your peers that promote further discussion, right? I do have a rubric here that tells you the criteria for this assignment and how you're going to be graded. All right, so that pretty much covers Module 6. Don't forget that this is due on the 23rd. I'll show you the Dropbox. And also, if you chose to do the project interview or peer-reviewed article that is due on the 23rd, I will be getting with my work-based learning students about yours as well. But you will see, you will turn your answers to your questions and your post under discussions. So if you go to discussions, I mean, there's a link there, but if you go to discussions, you will just scroll down until you get to module 6. And you'll see it's open now. I opened it for spring break in case people wanted to look at it, but you are not late because originally this wasn't supposed to open till the 17th of March, but it is due on the 23rd, so make sure you get it done by then. All right, as always, if you have any questions about the peer-reviewed article, because it's also due on the 23rd, or about the interview, which is due on the 23rd, please reach out, as well as if you have questions about Module 6. All right, I hope everyone has a great week. Until next time, take